Why is psychological safety important in an organization? I love this concept that Google and Harvard, Amy Edmondson at Harvard and the team at Rework at Google paired up to do a whole bunch of research to try to figure out what makes teams tick. And they found that the number one characteristic of high-performing teams at Google was the degree of psychological safety in that team. And so in this video, I've shared that before in videos. In this video, I'm going to pick it apart a little bit more. I'm going to share the 4 building blocks of psychological safety. Each of these 4 are going to become extremely practical to you. One, it's amazing knowledge to have as a leader or an educator, which is who this channel is exactly designed for. But these 4 building blocks also are a really memorable, easy way to actually weave in more psychological safety into your organization. So I love things that are practical and tangible. I want to always leave a video with like the answer to the question, what do I do with my hands? Or in other words, how can I implement this? How can I put this into practice to actually make an impact and a difference? As I share each of these 4 building blocks, I'll also share a really concrete example from my work with teams, organizations, and universities helping to build a culture of connection, belonging, and trust and amplify and increase that degree of psychological safety, because that is my job. By the end of this video, what is in my brain will be in your brain. Let's get into it. Psychological safety is kind of a big word. There's a lot of letters in it. And the term was kind of popularized by Amy Edmondson through research at Harvard in the 1990s. And so I want to just read you the definition offered on Google's website for psychological safety. Now, not on Google, but on the Google Rework website. I'll drop a link to it below. Rework is a really phenomenal effort on Google's part to pull together a bunch of research practices, ideas, really practical tools to help create a more people-focused culture and high-performing culture. So feel free to open that tab up and check that out another time. Whole mountain of awesome resources there. So the short version on Google's website is that psychological safety refers to an individual's perception of the consequences of taking an interpersonal risk. So my question is, in terms of why is psychological safety important to an organization, is what happens when people are able to take more interpersonal risks? And this is where I came up with the 4 building blocks of what happens, right? The 4 building blocks, the things that are created when psychological safety gets higher. These 4 ideas are coming from my experience working with clients, talking with people who work at Google, talking and working with some of the top, most high-performing organizations and universities in the world, and seeing what it is that's created and what it is that happens when psychological safety is included. And number 1 is inclusion, right? This has become a bit of a buzzword in the last couple years, especially with all the racial equity work and the Black Lives Matter movement, right? Inclusion, that word has gotten bigger and more popular somehow. And the way that it, for me, relates to interpersonal risk is when I show up to work, do I feel like I belong, right? Do I feel, maybe first, do I feel like there's connection? And do I feel like there's a relationship of trust? And ultimately, do I feel like I belong? I was walking around Airbnb headquarters several years ago, and over the top of many other doorways, they have just a phrase written that just says, belong here, or you belong here. And I love that idea, that physical representation of reminding people that you're in the right spot. Just as you are, right? You belong here. We hired you because you belong here. And so that level of inclusion, that is not only an idea that might be, plastered on a wall, but it's also an action that's regularly happening. One example from a client that I think is a really great way to promote a culture of inclusion, not just to include somebody in a moment, but to promote a culture of inclusion, is doing things that make sure people's voices are heard. And so organizations typically like to send out surveys, right? We like to send out an annual employee engagement survey. We like to do little pulse checks. We like to get all of this data from people. And yet, very rarely, before I start working with an organization, very rarely does that data actually get voiced back and reflected back to the organization. And it's one of the easiest ways to make people feel included is to let them know that their voices are being heard, right? That all voices are being heard, that all perspectives are being heard, even if they're not immediately acted upon or something changes. For the leader in that organization to say, I hear you, I see you, is an invaluable tool to create a level of inclusion. For those who are visually inclined, for me, if you had a magic wand, this is what inclusion looks like, right? Where people are really willing to know each other. People feel seen, heard. People feel like they're got, and that you're ultimately with them, that you're on the same team. Now, I'm not going to go into this in depth. I've got other videos unpacking this Ask Powerful Questions pyramid, which is what me and Will's book, Ask Powerful Questions, Create Conversations That Matter, is rooted in. But this very much is the next best thing to a magic wand, right? The magic wand doesn't exist to just like wave it and make inclusion happen, but that is why we wrote the book. So building block number 1 is inclusion. Building block number 2 is idea generation, right? When people are feeling more psychologically safe, they are more comfortable to take interpersonal risks, and they are way more free with the ideas they share. It is really surprising to me how much employees in an organization hold back when they're not safe, right? You might be paying employees a full-time salary day after day after day after day, and yet a lot of times, like, I don't know what the percentage is, and it's different for every employee and every team and every organization, but let's just say roughly 20% of any employee's potential is just suppressed. The ideas, the possible things that they want to create or share, or little improvements on a process, they just don't feel safe to share. A friend that works for a big company, who I'll leave nameless here, but he had this amazing idea to improve this entire product process line, and yet he didn't want to share it because his manager was really close with this other person, and this other person didn't like it. Silly relational dynamics that didn't make him feel safe enough and comfortable enough to take the interpersonal risk to share this idea that actually the scale that this process was operating at probably would, and somebody will eventually share it, maybe, but it'll probably save the organization millions and millions of dollars. And so when you talk about the power of psychological safety, like if somebody's suppressing that idea, whoa. I heard the owner of Burt's Bees, chapstick and other things, talk about once a employee who was working minimum, I shouldn't say minimum wage. I'm not sure that they were getting paid minimum wage because Burt's Bees is a B corporation, and so I'm assuming they paid a living wage rather than a minimum wage. But it was a bottom rung employee, let's say, working that product line, and they were trying to go zero waste at the plant. And he had this really great idea to put a sticker over the chapstick in a way that didn't create this, it just left the sticker right on the chapstick as opposed to creating this little tab that then was gonna end up in a river, lake, ocean somewhere, right? To just keep it all together. Simple, brilliant idea. It actually saved the company money, etc. Because the culture at Burt's Bees was, if you know something that the top should know, just tell the top. You don't need to play all these crazy games to get there, right? Just share the idea. We want that idea generation to come. And so for that, really making it clear that, and I think inclusion builds on this, right? Making sure that you want to hear people's voice. With idea generation, my best tip to put this into practice is to create space for idea generation and intentionally make it not anonymous. So don't drop anonymous. There is some psychological safety could be said for anonymous ideas, but I would say you should reward people for idea generation. For bad ideas and good ideas, you should reward idea generation because you're not rewarding the impact of that idea yet. Right? You might if it really lands well, right? It might show up as a bonus or something for them. But the idea here is that you're rewarding the act of sharing ideas. As long as you're rewarding the act of sharing ideas, people will continue to share more ideas. When we get building block number 1 of inclusion flowing, and we add in that idea generation, it creates building block number 3, which is innovation, which is tied actually very closely, I would argue, with building block number 4, which is implementation. So I'm going to talk about these together, innovation and implementation, because I used to work with a creativity and innovation professor and researcher at Penn State University. His name is Dr. Sam Hunter. And one of the things I really appreciated in his work is he defined, and this wasn't just him, this is this field, defines creativity as idea generation, or kind of associates, I should say, creativity with idea generation, whereas they associate innovation with implementation. And so I want to put these two together because you've got to have ideas in order to implement them, but ideas that don't get implemented, right, isn't much for innovation, right? You can have an amazing, and if you've ever hung out with a group of friends, it's like, I have this awesome idea for a pair of AR glasses that you can wear on a run and gamify exercise, blah, blah, blah. But they're never going to actually go and implement it, right? So idea generation without the implementation component isn't worth anything. And so the two are related to psychological safety. When people feel psychological safety, they innovate by coming up with new ideas. They create new ideas. But then the safety to take that interpersonal risk and just that risk in general of trying it. And that might even become a fiscal risk. And any company that doesn't want to stay stagnant, or any company that doesn't want to just stay same old, and they want to create something new, needs to increase psychological safety so that innovation and implementation can actually happen. Now for these two, these are going to be really different based on who you work for and why you're watching this video and how you landed here. But one very simple little practical tool to take this dynamic, to shift from a culture of same old to creating something new, right? To innovation and implementation is do something you do every day with your non-dominant hand. This is seemingly so unbelievably trivial, but I remember working a job one time, and I walked in, and one of my coworkers, who I was pretty sure was a righty, right? I had seen his keyboard and his mouse organized in this fashion. I walked in one day, and he had them flipped. And it's such a subtle thing, but I believe that when you do something with your non-dominant hand, it is working this, not the same, but similar pathways in the brain of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that is part of how Google and how Amy Edmondson at Harvard talk about and define psychological safety. That it's not only the leader's job to set the container of psychological safety, but you as the individual contributor also need to be thinking about how are you creating and building that psychological safety for yourself. And so play with this idea. Do something every day with your non-dominant hand, see if it works those muscles, and think about on a grander scale, what do you do every day and how can you change that to create something new? If you want to increase your own psychological safety right now in this exact moment, drop your answer to this question in the comments. It's good to remember what we know well, what we're good at. I would love to connect with you and meet that way. If you liked this video, you'll love this video on how to build a culture of psychological safety. A ton of really, really practical tips that you can immediately pick up and implement to crank up the psychological safety in your own organization. It was awesome hanging out in cyberspace. I'm Chad Littlefield. Have an awesome day.